Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Toy Story 4. Going into this sequel and the whole idea of this sequel was something that none of us really wanted. You know, to everyone, Toy Story 3 was the perfect conclusion. And coming into a film like this, we're all like, I guess, felt like you wrapped it up perfectly. But in a lot of ways, that's sort of the theme of the movie. The Toy Story trilogy, as it once was, now it's like 4 movies, much like how us as the audience felt going into this film, is kind of where we find Woody at this point. He has moved on from being Andy's toy, he's Bonnie's toy, he's not really the favorite anymore, he's not as important, even though behind the scenes, I guess, of Bonnie's room, he is very important and he's really doing a lot for her, despite not getting much in return. He can instantly think, I can do that, I know how to do this, and so forth, even though it's getting harder. And it's kind of like this underlying feeling that I think you get with age and in some situations where you go, why am I really still here? And I think when Woody starts to analyze that, that's what this film is really sort of about. It's kind of like, in theme-wise, it's like a Gran Torino or most of those Clint Eastwood movies where he talks about how he's super old and should retire, which he keeps making throughout almost my entire lifetime. What I find really fascinating about this film is that is what this film is about, but when you watch it, it doesn't feel like you're watching Gran Torino. It feels like you're watching a really fun, big audience, 4-quadrant kind of a movie, and I had an amazing time while watching this. In fact, I had a really great time. I ended up going with my wife and my daughter and my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law as well, and we had a really amazing time. Everyone was laughing. Everyone kind of wasn't as excited going in, but this film really won them over with its humor, with its storytelling, with what it was saying about Woody. And a lot of that goes to the director of this film, who is his first-time director, Josh Cooley, who does a really great job. Kind of reminds me what Lee Ulrich did, who had been working at Pixar for a while, then took on Toy Story 3. And this is kind of more similar, I guess, in that vein in certain ways. As much as it cares about the theme of Woody understanding his own kind of existential crisis and where he should go and where does he fit into this world and how he feels about Bo Peep and how he's always regretted her leaving and how his relationship with her was kind of the love of his life and how she's moved on without a kid. Now she has this life and these toys. Before, when he's a lost toy in the original Toy Story, he's crying, he's upset, he's like, it's going to be horrible, but then he kind of sees this other life that seems actually kind of great. That idea of moving on isn't something that narratives, especially nowadays with franchise filmmaking, are as interested in, because obviously you want, the characters to stay together and so forth, but that's actually not natural towards life. And what's interesting about the Toy Story franchise, and especially 3 and 4, is they've had to kind of grapple with the finality of, existence in itself, and the idea that one of the bigger moments is them accepting death itself, but the other big moments is them accepting that their relationship with Andy needs to end. It's really, really over. This film, the toys are kind of grappling with what's their future going to be? And maybe the future isn't them all together anymore. Maybe there is a future out there that's bigger than all of us. Well, at the same time, I'm laughing at Forky, who's kind of the new generation, I guess. This girl makes her own, toys out of a discarded kind of a spork. Seeing that whole newer kind of thing come in, and maybe it's a shift, a transitional time that you don't make the transition through, and that theme stuck with me. But at the same time, I remember so many of the laughs of this film. I really want to own this on Blu-ray, or probably just sign up for Disney Plus or whatever and watch this over and over again with my daughter, who loves the Toy Story stuff because I showed her the original just because I love that movie. And then when 4 came out and she saw Ed, she was really into it, and I took her and she had the most amazing time. And I don't think a 2-year-old really gets the idea of moving on and realizing, you need to move on with your life, and there's certain times you should take shifts and so forth. I don't think she got that, but I think this film works on both of those levels. And I did have conversations with people afterwards, do you think this was maybe too far away from being a kid's film, even though it is still G and stuff? Ride's a very fine line, and I think it does something that I loved about classic Hollywood films, in that they could take on a huge ethical topic but make it for a big audience, and everyone would have a good time at the movies. And that is a hard thing to do, especially in modern sensibilities, because it feels like everyone's a little too literal. That is a huge problem in general. People don't want their 4-quadrant movies movies taking on a topic like this as much as it does. And in a lot of what Pixar did, they're taking on kind of the older Hollywood idea of taking on this bigger existential crisis, but treating it in a fun way. So studio sort of like will let you get away with it because they're like, hey, we had a fun time at the movies. I don't really give a shit what your philosophy nonsense is in this. I had a good time, so we're good. And that's kind of what Toy Story 4 does. The performance by Keanu Reeves was really great. I think Keanu Reeves, especially, like, we've gotten the full range of Keanu throughout this summer season. We've got him as an action star and him as a comedic actor, and he was really good as Kid Kaboom, as well as you had Key and Peele reuniting and had one bit which I swear is definitely written by them, and I know they were brought on to like improv some things and maybe punch up jokes. I'm not sure how true that is, but or how much involvement they had, but the one bit about robbing the old lady was really funny, and is, even though it's like a very simply plotted out joke, it was so excellently done, and I'm glad to see them together in a movie. I really love Key and Peele, and it's a shame that they're not together anymore, but I loved how well they worked together in this film. We don't get to see Jordan Peele as an actor enough, but Keegan-Michael Key's such a great actor as well. And they were just so hilarious. Like, I think of all the fun I had, I think of all that. How this was a really great family film about the idea of toys and understanding your own mortality, but also laughing and hugging each other along the way. And certainly, like, Coco did that also, and Coco's a film that's playing in my house all the time because my daughter loves that film. And I think Toy Story 4 fits into that, but this also represents a bigger thing within Pixar, because Pixar, this is a real transition time for Pixar. Obviously, Lasseter is gone for good reason, because he was a pretty shit person. And treating women, I'd say, pretty poorly. He's an important part of animation history and obviously Pixar history, but he's gone. And I guess in some ways, if this had been the final thing he had worked on, which I sort of think that's where it was gearing towards, this would have been an amazing final kind of curtain call and welcoming in the new generation. That was taken away from him, and I think rightly so, given how he behaved. But I think this more represents the future. They had a Tin Toy reference, which I appreciated. It's the first Pixar short to win an Academy Award, as well as the first CG animated film to win an Academy Award as well. But I think with Pete Docter running the show now, and obviously Pixar is shifting into a totally different era. I mean, I can tell you right now that the history books on Pixar will definitely talk about how this is a major shift. And the former leaders of Pixar are all gone now. And most of the brain trust is, I think Andrew Stanton helped write this film. He is given a credit with writing the screenplay, even though the story by credit was like forever, including Rashida Jones and her writing partner, Will McCormick, who early on worked on it and felt they had a philosophical difference with John Lasseter. Everyone's wanted to know what that probably means, but I guess we can read into that. But this is the shift of a different era, and it's kind of giving up of what the previous reputation is, because that era is over. And this is almost like sort of a nice bookend of saying, like, hey, our greatest protagonist was Woody, and Woody has now moved on with his life. And if we ever want to do a Toy Story thing again, I'm sure they'll do a special or something. We can't use him anymore. I mean, they could, but they couldn't have Buzz Lightyear and all the others, and it's kind of like made this interesting kind of situation. I kind of hope they don't, but I'm sure they'll figure out a way to do either or. With them kind of feeling like, at least, that kind of puts this to bed, it kind of brings up what the new era of Pixar is going to be and how we kind of have to move on and let the new generation take hold, whether that be Forky or whomever. And I think Pixar is in a real interesting spot right now. They went through a decade mostly of sequels, and for this to kind of maybe close the sequels out and kind of say, you know what, we're moving on, and you know, next year we're getting Onward and Soul. And I think this kind of represents them understanding that it's time to put their past reputation to bed, even though those you can still watch those films, but maybe that it's time to transition onward to new creations and new horizons. That's kind of what the film represented to me, while at the same time it represented probably one of the best movie nights my young family has encountered, which was really special to me. We moved that weekend and then kind of closed it out taking my daughter to Toy Story 4, and it was really special, and she had such a good time, and it's like fun to see a kid freak out about a movie. And it kind of reminded me what a great Pixar film could be. I think this is definitely one of the best sequels of theirs they've ever made. It's, in general, it seems like the Toy Story series is like the good series, and the rest are kind of subpar, okay. I've never really liked any of the sequels that much. Toy Story 4 continues that grand storytelling of the series. You know, I don't think it's as good as 3. The first one's like one of the most important films in cinema history. 2, I'm not as big of a fan of. I'd say it's probably around that level, but but I still think it's like really, really good. Like, if we're just talking about Pixar sequels, it's probably in the top 3, which are all Toy Story, and it really resonated with me. But I love films that do a lot and do it successfully, especially for a modern audience. There's a certain intellectual complexity to that I don't think we ever truly appreciate, and I think Toy Story 4 does that so well. It's just beautiful what it's doing, and the stakes feel so high. It feels so important. It feels so lovely. It feels spooky and scary. I love how they deal with the antagonist with Gabby, voiced by Christina Hendricks. She has such a good voice for that kind of doll character, and the sadness in that, but the interesting way they deal with the antagonist. It almost feels like this film is more interested in being a character piece on Woody than it is on telling a story with an antagonist. It's far more interested in telling the themes of it than it is in doing something else, which is odd and interesting. This is probably a much more interesting film structurally and how it's written than it has any right to be, and I sort of really love that about this movie. I find it really a really interestingly well-written film. A film of theirs that's written in a way that's surprising, which I haven't really felt from them since Inside Out. Is it as good as Inside Out? And there's no fucking way. But it's still probably one of the better of theirs of the decade, and I think it inhabits something that Pixar did very well with, I've been rewatching a lot of the Pixars with my daughter recently, and when you watch like WALL-E or Inside Out or Monsters Inc. or any of those, you notice how much you're laughing, how much you're crying, how much it's touching your soul, but how entertained you are. I think Pixar are cinephiles. They care about the intelligence of movies and storytelling and what you can say with those things, but they are also entertainers. And I think that's something, a 4-quadrant animated film can do really well, because you are appealing to a wider range audience, particularly in the theaters. And I don't know of many that really try to do that as well as Pixar does. This was just a very smart film and a beautiful film. I laughed so much. I had such a good time. I had such a good time with my daughter, and I got to think about death as well. So overall, it was a well-rounded experience at the movies. This movie will probably be a special movie for me, which is something I didn't think this one would do. When I was thinking about Toy Story and this franchise, I was thinking about, the first film really meant something to me. I don't know if the second one really ever did, but 3 kind of represented, I'm an adult now and I've grown up, and I'm seeing this film, and it's about toys and moving on and so forth. I took my daughter to this film, and it kind of represents, you have to know the time to move on and grow from something. It shows me kind of that full circle of adult life is not just understanding to take responsibility, not just understanding you can do everything, but also understanding when to tip your hat away and what is the right thing to do for not just yourself, but for the people you love. And I think that's what Toy Story 4 did so effectively. But I think what's extra effective about it is it made you laugh while you were doing it. And this is one of the most entertaining films of the summer that has made me think about all its moral lessons within. And I can't think of a greater cinematic achievement from a Hollywood film than to make me think of all these things while truly entertaining, brightening the spirits up of everyone who had a really rough weekend moving everything. And I think that's actually a pretty special thing, to do all those things and to make you leave and have that, like, hey, life is pretty good because I saw a pretty damn good movie. I used to leave Pixar films, they used to have such a great run in the early 2000s, the aughts or whatever, and I'd leave on a cloud, and I left that way again. And I think it meant so much more because, I got to think about the legacy of these films, but I also got to leave with a little girl who was truly enamored with the experience, and that's something I don't think I'll ever forget. So if you have seen Toy Story 4 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.